Good morning, class. Welcome now to our quarter 4, week 7 in mathematics. Okay, so before we start, let us bow our head and put the presents to the Lord. Okay, let us pray.
Dear God, thank you for loving me and giving me your all. When I grow up, I will still be serving you. I want to know you more. I want to love you more. I'll never forget you, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to know you, Lord. You are a great big God. I'm young and do not know a lot. Come and be my own. I want to love you more, giving you my life and all. You died for me, you sacrifice. I won't forget you, Lord. I love you, Jesus. I'll grow up knowing you. I love you, Jesus. I'll grow up serving you. I love you, Jesus. My life is saved by you. I'll never forget. I'll grow up loving you.
Okay, so our lesson this week is all about describing experimental probability and performing an experimental probability and records the results by listing. So, at the end of the lesson, you are expected to describe an experimental probability, perform an experimental probability and records the results by listing, and enjoy doing experimental probability test. So last week we studied about a graph. Again, what is a graph? Alright, so a graph is a diagram showing relationships between two or more things. And the graph that we had learned last week is all about a line graph. So again, what is a line graph? Alright, so a line graph is a data representation showing the changes over a period of time. Okay, a line graph also consists of vertical axis, or we call that y-axis, and the horizontal axis, or that is an x-axis. Alright, can you describe an experimental probability? Alright, so for you to describe an experimental probability, let us see the video presentation taken from the YouTube channel. Okay, are you ready? Okay.
Hi, I'm Rob. Welcome to Math Antics. In this video, we're going to learn about how to do math with things that only sometimes happen. They might be likely or unlikely. We're going to learn about probability. Usually in math, we deal with things that always happen the same way. They're completely certain. Like if you add 1 and 1, you're always going to get 2. If you multiply 2 and 3, you're always going to get 6. There's no uncertainty at all. But in the real world, things aren't always so predictable. Take a coin toss, for example. We can't predict whether it'll be heads or tails. It's unpredictable or random. And that's why some people will flip a coin to help decide which of two things to do. That's how I make every decision in life. Why am I not surprised? Oh no. Good luck. But even though we don't know what each coin flip is going to be, we do know a few things about it. We know that with a fair coin toss, that heads is just as likely to show up as tails. The probability of an event, like getting heads or getting tails, is a value that tells us how likely that event is to happen. With our coin toss, since each side is just as likely, and there's only 2 sides to a coin, if we flip the coin a lot of times, we should expect that about half the flips will be heads and about half the flips will be tails. That means that the probability of flipping heads is the fraction 1/2, and the probability of flipping tails is also 1/2. Let's look at this in a little more detail on something called a probability line. It's a number line that goes from 0 to 1. A probability of 0 means that an event cannot happen. It's impossible. And a probability of 1 means that an event is definitely going to happen. It's certain. That's why the probability line only goes from 0 to 1. An event can't be less likely than impossible, and it can't be more likely than certain. A probability of 1/2, like with our coin toss, means that an event is just as likely to happen as it is to not happen. A probability less than 1/2 means that an event is unlikely, and a probability greater than 1/2 means that an event is likely. Oh, and in addition to fractions, it's also common to write probabilities as decimals or percentages, since you can easily convert between those three. A probability of 0 is the same as a 0% chance of something happening. A probability of 1/2 is the same as a 50% chance of something happening. And a probability of 1 is the same as a 100% chance of something happening. Now that you know how a coin toss works, let's see an example of an event that is unlikely, using something a little more complicated than a coin. Let's take a look at dice. A standard die has 6 sides numbered 1 through 6. When you roll it, any of those sides is just as likely to come up as the others. That sounds a lot like flipping a coin, doesn't it? Each side of a die is just as likely to come up as the others, and each side of a coin was just as likely to come up as the other. So you might expect that the probability of rolling a 3 is 50%. But remember, with a coin toss, there are only 2 possibilities, heads or tails. With dice, there are 6 possibilities, and that's going to make a difference in its probability. One way to think about it is that it's certain that one of those 6 sides will land facing upwards, which is a probability of 1 or 100%. But since only one side can face upwards for a given roll, we have to divide out that value among all the possibilities. In the case of a coin toss, since there were only 2 possibilities, we had to divide the probability by 2. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2, which is the decimal 0.5 or 50%. But with the die, we need to divide the probability up evenly between 6 possibilities. 1 divided by 6 is 1/6, which is equivalent to 0.167 or 16.7%. So that would be right here on our probability line. That means it isn't likely that I would roll a 3, for instance, but it's just as likely as rolling any other number. And since all 6 numbers have the same probability, each number should come up about as often as the others. To see if they do, I'm going to conduct some trials. That's an excellent argument. Allow me to deliberate. Guilty. Actually, when dealing with probability, a trial, which can also be called an experiment, is a process that has a random outcome, like tossing a coin, or rolling dice, or spinning a spinner. And the outcome of the trial is what happens in that particular trial, like flipping heads, or rolling a 3. So I'm going to conduct several trials by rolling a die multiple times and keeping track of how many times I roll each number. Aha! You said that each number was going to come up just as often as the other numbers. But look, there's more 2s than there are 5s. How do you explain that? Well, remember, we're dealing with things that are random. They're unpredictable. We can't know exactly what will happen, just what will happen on average. So now I have to calculate the average? Well, when we say on average, we mean that the more trials you do, the closer you get to the expected probabilities. Keep watching. There. Now that we've done a lot of trials, you can see that our totals are much closer to what you would expect them to be. I guess you're probably right. That's one of the really important things to keep in mind about probability. If you do just a few trials, the results might not end up very close to what you'd expect. In fact, they could be way off. But if you do more trials, you increase your chances of reaching the expected probabilities. There's another thing I should point out. Remember the probability of flipping heads is 1/2, and the probability of flipping tails is 1/2. The probability of rolling a 1 is 1/6, and the probability of rolling any other number on the die is 1/6. If you add up the probabilities for the coin flip, you get 2 over 2, or 1. And if you add up the probabilities for rolling a die, you get 6 over 6, which is also 1. And that's not just a coincidence. If you add up the probabilities of all possible outcomes of a trial, the total is going to be 1, or 100%, because it is certain that at least one of those possibilities will happen. Let's look at some more examples. For these examples, we'll use a spinner. If we had a spinner with just 6 equally sized sectors, the probabilities would be exactly exactly the same as with dice. So we want a few more sectors. There, that's more like it. Now we have 16 equally sized sectors. So what's the probability of spinning a 12? Well, just like with dice, where we had to split up the 100% between all 6 possibilities, we'll do the same thing now, but we'll split it up between 16 possibilities. So the probability of spinning a 12 is 1 over 16, or about 6%, which is right here on the probability line. We can see that the probability of spinning a 12 is less likely than the probability of rolling a 3. That makes sense because there are more possible outcomes with our spinner. But what if we color some of the sectors a different color and we want to know the probability of spinning a certain color? Now we have 5 sectors colored blue and 11 sectors colored yellow. So what's the probability of spinning a blue? Remember how with the coin toss, we ended up with the fraction 1 over 2, and with the die roll, we got the fraction 1 over 6? In both cases, we had 1 as the numerator. And that's because we were interested in only one of the possible outcomes, like the probability of flipping heads, or the probability of the number 3 being rolled. But in this case, the top number of our fraction will be 5, because any of these 5 sectors will give us the color we want. And the bottom number will still be the total number of possibilities, which is 16, because that's how many total sectors we have. So the probability of spinning a blue is 5 over 16, or about 31%. That's still considered unlikely, but it's more likely than spinning a specific number. And this method will work for figuring out the probability of any event. You just make a fraction with the numerator as the number of outcomes that satisfy your requirement, and the denominator as the total number of possible outcomes. Let's try the same method to find the probability of spinning the yellow. Our top number should be 11 because there's 11 yellow sectors, and our bottom number should still be 16. So the probability of spinning the yellow is 11 over 16, or about 69%. Now we finally have a probability that's considered likely. And it makes sense because you can see by looking at our spinner that it's more likely to spin a yellow than a blue. And you'll notice, if we add up 5 over 16 and 11 over 16, we get 16 over 16, or a probability of 1. So that's a good sign that we did it right. Let's look at another example. Suppose we have a bag of marbles. There are 3 green marbles, 7 yellow marbles, and 1 white marble. If we mix them all up and pull out a marble at random, what's the probability of it being green? Well, the top number of our probability fraction will be 3 because there's 3 green marbles. So there's 3 outcomes that get us what we want. And the bottom number will be 11 because there's a total of 11 possible marbles that we can pull out. So the probability of pulling out a green marble is 3 over 11, or 0.27, or 27%. It's right here on the probability line. That means it's unlikely. And that makes sense because you can see that it would be less likely to pull out a green marble than one of the other ones. Let's try this again for calculating the probability of pulling out a yellow marble. This time, the numerator of our fraction will be 7 because there's 7 yellow marbles. The denominator will still be 11 because there's still 11 marbles total. So the probability of pulling out a yellow marble is 7 over 11, or 0.64, or 64%. Another example of an event that's likely. How about pulling out the white marble? Well, the top number will be 1, since there's only 1 white marble, and the bottom number is still 11. So the probability of pulling out a white marble is 1 over 11, or 0.09, or 9%. Not very likely. And if we add up these probabilities, we get 11 over 11, or 100%, just as we expected. Alright, so you should have a pretty good handle on basic probability now. You just have to remember to make a fraction with the numerator being the number of outcomes that give you what you want, and the denominator being the total number of possibilities. And we learned about the probability line, and that a probability can't be less than 0 or greater than 1, or 100%. We also learned that the more trials or experiments you conduct, the closer your results will get to the expected probabilities. Of course, the way to get good at it is to practice. So be sure to do a lot of problems on your own. And as always, thanks for watching Mathematics, and I'll see you next time. And I sentence you to 5 years hard labor. Learn?
Alright, so it's very clear ang kanyang explanation regarding the probability test. So, sabi niya, probability it is equals to the number of favorable outcomes over number of possible outcomes. Okay? So, napakaklaro. So sa dami niyang ibinigay na example, and also he summarized the lesson or generalized the lesson from the start to the finish. Now, I have an activity. So supposing that that different kind of shape class was closed. Nakasara siya. Then, we are going to know what are the possible outcomes. So, how many possible outcomes? Okay, there are 6 possible outcomes. And there are 6 possible outcomes to the experiment of picking a rectangle, a triangle, a circle, a rectangle, a triangle, and a rectangle. So, in that activity, what shape has favorable outcomes? Alin yung mas favor o yung mas marami ang lalabas? Okay, very good. The rectangle. So, the rectangle has a favorable outcomes. Why? Because the triangle is or are 3, while the circle is only 1 and the triangle is only 2. So one or more outcomes of an experiment is an event. So a probability tells how likely it is that an event will occur. All outcomes are assumed to be equally likely. So it has an equal chances of occurring. So kagaya kanina explain kanina ng ating nasa video. So the probability of an event is the ratio of the number of favorable outcomes to the number of possible outcomes. So yun nga yung sinabi kanina. Now, a probability class, we can express that by fraction, by decimals, and percents also. So now, let us answer the next question. What is the probability of picking a rectangle? So how many rectangles do we have? We have 3. How many shapes do we have? 6. So therefore, the probability of picking a rectangle is 3/6. Again, so tatlo ang ating rectangle, 6 sila lahat. That is why 3/6. So yung 3, that is the favorable outcome. And yung 6, yung denominator, that is the possible outcome. Posible na lalabas yung 6 na yan. Alright? So now, since the 3/6 is not in the lowest term, we're going to change that to lowest term, and that is 1/2. So 3/6 or 1/2. So 1/2, if we are going to change that to percent or to decimal, that is 0.5 or 5/10. If we are going to change that to percent, that is 50%. That is why, as what I have said a while ago, that a rectangle has a favorable outcomes because 50% among the shape are rectangle. Okay? Next question. What is the probability of picking a triangle? So how many triangles do we have? 2 triangles do we have. And the shapes do we have? 6. Therefore, the probability of picking a triangle is 2/6. Okay, 2/6 in lowest term, that is 1/3. So why 1/3? So 2 divided by 2, 1. 6 divided by 2 equals 3. So 1/3 class, if we change that to decimal number, that is 0.333. So repeating decimals na siya, hindi na siya nagbabago. Or contiguous decimal. Okay, so 0.333, we are going to express that in decimal, or in percent rather, that is 33.3%. Or, you can also say 33.33%. So, I only one decimal place lang ang kinuha ko. Alright? Next, last, what is the probability of picking a circle? How many circles do we have? Only 1, and they are 6. So, therefore, the probability of picking a circle is 1/6. And 1/6 class in decimal points, that is 0.16 0.16, 0.16666, tuloy-tuloy na yung 6. Therefore, if we're going to change that to percent, that is 16.7%. So, if we are going to sum it up, isa-sum up natin yung 50% plus 33.3% plus 16.7%, that is equals to 100%. And also class, 3/6 plus 2/6 plus 1/6, that is 6 over 6, or 6 divided by 6 equals 1, and 1 times 100, that is 100%. Alright? So that is how to get the probability test. Any more question? Alright, so I think you already learned about recording of probability test. So probability equals the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible outcomes. Take note, hindi po yan natin i-divide. We change our fraction to lowest term, but we are not going to divide. Let's say, we divide na natin if we change to percent. Again, probability can be expressed in fraction, in percent, or in decimal numbers. So again, how to get the probability is, probability, the formula equals number of favorable outcomes over number of possible outcomes. So in other words, in every probability, your answer must be in a fraction form. Again, so what is a probability? Alright, so probability is a measure of the likelihood that a certain event will occur. Or shall we say, an extent to which an event is likely to occur measured by the ratio of the favorable cases to the whole number of cases possible. It can be expressed as a number between 0 to 1. The probability of an event not occurring is 0. Siyempre, hindi siya nangyayari. If an event is certain to occur, its possibility is 1. The probability of an event is between 0 to 1 inclusive, meaning it can be 0 or 1. Thus, the probability of an event to occur cannot be less than 0 or greater than 1. Alright? So again, I have here another video for more clarification and suggestion. Again, this video from YouTube channel. Thank you to the YouTube channel for lending us their video.
Guys, I'm Jun and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to discuss about experimental probability. It is the ratio of the number of times an event occurs to the total number of trials or times the activity is performed. Let's say, I flip a coin 4 times and I get 1 head plus 3 tails, and I wanted to know what the probability I might get head if I flip the coin again. I get 1/4 because I get 1 head out of the 4 times I flip the coin. Okay guys, to understand more about experimental probability, let's watch this video. Sample number 1. Andre and Emma are rolling a 0 to 5 number cube. When the cube shows 0, 1, or 2, Andre wins. When it shows 3, 4, or 5, Emma wins. Ito yan. Basa cube. Okay, para dito tayo na-confuse. Ito yung guy. Ito yung number cube. Hindi natin ito alam ito. Ito ang gagamit. Okay. Wow. Ang number cube ay mayroong anim na cases. So, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 cases. So, mayroong anim. So, ibig sabihin, probability, meron tayong anim na outcomes or 6 total number of outcomes. So, tandaan, 6 total number of outcomes. Okay, ang unang tanong ganito. What is the probability that Emma will win? So, nakasaad doon sa example number 1 natin ay when it shows 3, 4, or 5, Emma will win. Okay. Balik tayo sa phases na number cube. Sabi, 3, 4, or 5, Emma will win. So, meron tayo tatlong number. 3, 4, 5. So, meron tayo number of ways it will happen is equals to 3 sa tatlo. So, sa formula ng probability, number of ways it will happen all over total number of outcomes. Sabi ko kanina, meron tayo anim na or 6 number of outcomes. Tapos, mayroon tayo 3 na number of ways it will happen. So, in the formula of probability, it will be 3 over 6 or 1 over 2 or 50%. Ibig sabihin, 50% ang chances ni Ina na so meron siya tatlo out of 6 pieces. Okay. Question number 2. What is the probability that Andre will win? Okay. So example number 1, pag lumabas ang 0, 1, saka 2, mananalo si Andre. Laro. So, meron tayong tatlo number of ways it will happen. Samantalang meron tayong 6 number of outcomes. Okay? Ibig sabihin, 3 divided by 6 is equal to 1 half or 50%. Ibig sabihin, mayroong 50% chances si Andre na manalo paglabas ang 0, 1, saka 2. So, sa madaling sabi, pantay lang si Emma at saka si Andre dahil meron silang 50% na
Chances.
chances. Okay. Question number 3. Suppose we take 120 times. Ibig sabihin, ito-toss nila ang number cube ng 120 times. Ibig sabihin, pagulungan nila ang number cube ng 120 times. Okay, ito yung tanong. Letter A. About how many times would we expect Emma to naglaro sila ng 120 times, so 120 times 50%. So, ibig sabihin, mananalo ng 60 times si Emma.
Emma.
Kasi yung 50% ng 120 is 60. Pero hindi po ganito ang totoong nangyayari. Sa formula natin, 60 times na mananalo si Emma. Pero hindi po yan ang kadalasang nangyayari. Ang nangyayari po ay ito. In between po yan. Ibig sabihin, hindi po 60 eksakto. Pwede 55, pwede 65. Maaaring 50 times, pwede rin 70 times. In between po yan. So, hindi po eksakto na 60 times. Klaro po ah. So, sa probability line kasi, yung nasa gitna is yung 16. So, in between po, pwede 55, pwede 65 times. Hindi po saradong 60 times. Okay. Okay, letter B. About how many times will you expect Andre to win? So, katulad po yan ni Emma. 60 times. In theory. Pero sa katotohanan, pwede 55 times or 65 times. Pwede rin 50 times or 70 times. Klaro ba? Klaro. Okay. Would you be surprised if Emma did not win exactly 60 times? Tama po. Hindi pa ako magtataka. Kasi, according to the probability line, in between po yan. Hindi po exacto ng 60. Sabi ko na kanina, ulit-ulit lang tayo, 55 times or 65 times. Klaro, klaro.
Okay. So, medyo clear din ang explanation ni Sir. But it's all about the problem. So, sinabi niya na so since 120 times na i-roll natin yung dice na yun na may number na 0 to 5, so yung probability kasi is 50%. So sabi nila is not 60, exactly 60 na lalabas. Hindi naman talaga kasi depende yun kung ano yung lalabas na number doon kapag nag-roll tayo ng dice, di ba? Pero ang sabi niya, in between doon kay 60, maaring 55, maaring 70. So kung yan doon banda, so ibig sabihin, medyo okay. Kasi probability nga, ibig sabihin ng probability, likely to happen. Pwedeng mangyari, pwedeng exactly but not likely to happen. Okay? So now, this is now your time to do your task. The letters of the word probability. So yung word daw na probability are put in a jar. Kunyari nakaisa-isa yun ng mga letters na yan. Find the probability of picking the indicated letter or letters. Ayan. So ilan ba ang probability? Halimbawa, ilan ang probability na mabunot mo yung letter B? Number 2, letter D. Sa number 3, letter A. Number 4, all of the vowel letters. Number 5, all the consonant letters. Then number 6, I. Number 7, L. Number 8, Y. Number 9, P. And number 10, O. Again, what is the probability of picking the letter? That letter that comes from the word probability. Ilang letters ang probability? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So, ibig sabihin yung denominator mo dyan is 11. So, sa numerator na lang. Okay? Alright. So, for your quiz, is available this afternoon in your Google Classroom and in our Facebook GC chat. Okay? And for in your reflection, in your notebook, write your personal insights about the lesson using the prompts below. I understand that. I realize that. I need to learn more about. Okay. Thank you. Enjoy doing your activities. See you next week. Goodbye, class.